Hey folks, how are you? My name is John Keene. I am the agency owner of the Keene Agency Farmers Insurance, located on Ford Street in Bridgeport, right at the intersection of Holstein, 4th and Ford. Wanted to come to you today. I thought about putting together a series of videos, hopefully to make you a little bit smarter about your insurance. Maybe ways to save money, but more importantly, ways on how your coverages work. And this will be the first one, and what a better week to do it in when we talk about the tropical storm that passed through on Tuesday. So one of the things I thought very first topic might be to talk about flood and flood insurance and how it's covered, or really how it's not covered on your homeowner's policy. So the very first thing that you should know is that flood, groundwater, that's coming in or coming in from the outside into your basement or your first floor is not covered on your homeowner's policy. So flooding is not a covered, what we call a covered peril or a cause of loss. So if you've had that and you've called your insurance agent or you've called your insurance company, you're probably finding that out. So flood or flood insurance is a totally separate policy, which you can purchase. Typically, if you live in a flood zone, in which case you would have a mortgage require you to also carry flood insurance on top of your homeowner's insurance. And if you live in a flood zone, it's very possible that your flood insurance is running you well over $1,000, maybe into $2,000–$3,000 a year. So that's actually just a good tip if you're out buying, shopping for homes, is to check in first, make sure that the home that you're looking at isn't in a flood zone. But that's a topic for another time. For now, if you're not in a flood zone, that doesn't mean that you cannot have insurance. And I think what we found out this week is if it rains hard enough, guess what? Everybody's in a flood zone. And everybody can purchase it. It's a flood insurance program. It's available through the federal government. You can purchase it if you're not in a flood zone, which would be a preferred risk area. It's very possible that these policies could run you somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 to $200 a year. Reality is a lot of the phone calls that I've taken this week from my clients about flooding in their basement are from people that aren't in flood zones. So really only 25% of the flood claims or the flood calls that come in as far as claims are people that live in a flood zone and are required to have it. So something you could certainly talk about with your own insurance agent, your insurance company. If you'd like, you're more than welcome to call or email me. My contact information will be at the end of this video, and I'm happy to go over it and check to see whether or not your home is in a flood area. I can pull a flood certification for your home. It's also important now with the mortgage rates that are really low, and you're reading about interest rates really almost down to zero. A lot of folks are taking the time to possibly refinance their home. I've also had clients that have found out that when they first bought their home and they have their first mortgage, their home wasn't in a flood zone. But over the last 3, 5, 7 years, the federal government has been very diligent in going back and redrawing and evaluating the maps, the flood maps, all through the United States. So while when you may have purchased your home 10 years ago or probably longer, you weren't in a flood zone, in the last 3 to 5 years, you may have been put there. Now, all of a sudden, you're refinancing. The mortgage company is going to do their due diligence. They're going to pull a flood certification, and lo and behold, bang, your property all of a sudden changed into a different area, into a different flood zone, and now you're going to be required to carry flood insurance. So it's also important from a refinance standpoint to just make sure you know everything about your property before you start going down the road and then all of a sudden having an extra cost that you didn't intend on having. Because typically the mortgage companies are going to request the same amount as the replacement cost of your home, and the max on that is $250,000. I've done quotes well in excess of $3,000 to $4,000 on flood zone policies where you're required to have it. So just a couple of helpful hints that, if you found out you have basement water and you called your insurance company and found out it wasn't covered, you actually can get coverage through a separate policy. It's also very possible that you could look into what is called sump pump, water backup, or sewer and drain coverage. You'll see it on insurance policies under any one of those 3 categories, and they all pretty much cover the same thing. It's a little different coverage, and that's probably a video for another time. But let's just talk about the sump pump coverage. I had a phone call with a client no more than 5–10 minutes ago. They had sewer and drain coverage on their policy, which is covering the failure of a sump pump. The amount of water that came through this week, unbelievable. Sump pumps probably couldn't have kept up. And if you have this added coverage on your policy, you may have some coverage for the water damage that occurred to your basement. It's something you can add to your current homeowner's policy. Typically, they come in $5,000 increments, $5,000 all the way up to $50,000, and ballpark. Probably the starting cost for that is somewhere in the $50 range a year and can go in upwards of up over $200. But certainly coverage that you could add to your current homeowner's policy and not have to worry about flood coverage, especially if you have a sump pump. It's probably a good conversation to have with your agent or your company. So certainly hope that these were helpful hits for you, and it makes you a little smarter about your insurance, especially with the weather that we had coming through. I'm sure it's only August. I'm sure we're going to have way more in the way of weather to be dealing with, and winds and trees and everything else. And we'll be getting into those topics a little bit later on with other videos. Again, my contact information will be at the end of the video, and happy to answer any questions or give you a free quote or evaluate your coverage, find out where your gaps are and things that you can take a look at, and maybe even save some money along the way. So thanks again for listening, giving us a click, and we look forward to speaking with you by phone or answering any questions. Put them in the comment section. I'll be looking at them and be able to help you out, or maybe even give you a phone call if you'd like me to do that. Thanks again. Again, John Keene, Farmers Insurance on Ford Street, Keene Agency in Bridgeport. Have a great day.